Hello and welcome to Chapter Chat with Sarah. Here we share true life stories. Today's guests are Lorraine and Joan, and the story we are talking about today is Chapter 16 in my book, Healing Your Life. Ralph, or Biff, as he'd like to be called, is Chapter 16 in my book, Healing Your Life. And his subtitle was, in the end, his life had truly counted for something, but he had struggled throughout his entire life thinking that he didn't matter. Here with us today is a former classmate and friend of Biff's. Welcome.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. As a former classmate, could you please tell us a little bit about Biff and from maybe what age did you guys first meet and know him? Was this in elementary or when was this?
I don't recall when we first became acquainted, but I think it was back in junior high. I believe he went to a different elementary school than what I attended. We shared the same last name, so we were often paired together. And we were not related, but he liked to tell the teachers that we were brother and sister or cousins, which got us into trouble a few times.
So he had a sense of humor then.
Yes, but obviously we were not twins. If you were to see us, you would understand why.
Then in high school, would you say, was he popular? And what about being a good student? And was he athletic? Did he compete in sports? And tell us about what high school looked like for both of you.
I remember that his mother had abandoned his family, I believe, when he was in junior high school. But he never talked about his mom. He was very outgoing and fun-loving in school. In school, he began running track. He loved running. It gave him that runner's high, I guess. He just really enjoyed it. Later on, after high school, he belonged to some area running clubs, and I believe he even ran in the Boston Marathon.
And yes, you're right. That is in the book about competing, and I know that he proudly had a picture of him with his number on the chest of the shirt hanging in his bedroom, and often he would point that out to people that came over. So it was a very proud moment for him. When you said the mother abandoned, then was it his father then that raised him, or who did he live with?
His father raised him. He had an older brother who was about 1 year older, and then he had a younger sister who was in elementary school. So his dad had his hands full. In spite of all of that, he was very outgoing. He was very fun-loving in school. I don't recall that he ever let that get him down, or if it did, he never really demonstrated it outwardly.
So he had a lot of friends then, too.
Yes, he did. Yes. I think he couldn't help but have friends because he was so much fun to be around.
And in the book, I remember saying that he kind of rocked back and forth with excitement, and his eyes were kind of bright and always with a smile. So always happy to see you, yes, and greet you. So it made you feel like you were immediately a friend of his.
Absolutely. That's true, yes.
So in the book, too, we talked a little bit about the year that you graduated, and that was in 1969, and that was kind of a historic year with everything that was going on at the time. We had the Vietnam War, we had Woodstock. It was kind of, I believe that was the burning of the bras era. Did I get that wrong or remember that wrong?
No, you remember that correctly.
Okay. All right. So that there was just a lot of dynamics going on at the time. And we had classmates that were drafted because the draft was active. And if your number got called, you were going. So what is your memory about 1969 and graduating? And, what was that like for our fellow classmates, for Biff and for yourself?
Well, in 1969, the draft was in full swing for Vietnam. So this was a really frightening time for young men. With all of the death statistics on the media, I can't imagine what it was like for an 18-year-old kid to find out your draft number and know you're going to be flown into a combat zone far away from home. People posed their draft numbers. And I mean, some of the kids had numbers like 100, some had numbers like 1 or 2, which was really, really frightening. I just can't imagine what that felt like. It was just a crazy era. And then there was the protesting against the Vietnam War and the make love, not war. And everyone had long hair, and the Beatles invasion had occurred. It was a fun time and a scary time.
I was going to say a lot of dynamics to be dealing with and trying to figure out where you're going to go in your life then after graduation. Some didn't have a choice. Some were going to be facing a war, an unpopular war, as it turned out too.
Yes.
So Biff, was he drafted then?
He did get drafted, and I believe he ended up being discharged for medical reasons. He felt a lot of guilt about that because a lot of his friends and people that were in his platoon at training all went to Vietnam, and he ended up coming home. So after he came home, he married, he had 2 children, and I think his life kind of took a down cycle after that.
What do you think contributed to that? Do you think that, he had friends? I think he had a really good friend, a longtime friend that was in service. That we talked about that in the book, that he was actually a tunnel rat, which was a terrifying job that had to be done, getting down in the tunnels that were booby trapped by the Viet Cong. I really don't know that we expounded a whole lot on that at the book, but that seems like what you're saying is that once he was discharged and married, it was shortly after that that things started to spiral downward for him.
Yes, I believe he turned to drugs at that time. I'm sure a lot of it was just the period of time of the guilt that he felt from not being able to serve in Vietnam with his friends and comrades. And of course, drugs were prevalent in that day.
They certainly were. I don't know, was that well, the drug of choice? I think was marijuana and
And cocaine.
really cocaine. Yeah. So very, very addictive drug use then. Moving on then with that, he did have a job that he had for several years, I believe, but the drug issue kind of came and went, or was it continuous? And at a certain point, he was divorced, and then met up. In the book again, we talked about, he referred to Carol as being his true love. So, do you know how much later in life they reconnected?
Oh, they reconnected several years, probably 20 years later. He worked as a maintenance, I believe, at a company for many, many years. That's where he retired from. But he loved riding motorcycles, and he was in a terrible, terrible motorcycle accident where he was almost killed. They literally had to pin him back together. So he had plates and pins, and he was in terrible pain all of the time. And this was back in the time when doctors prescribed pain medication, and then one day they suddenly took it away. So, like a lot of other people who are dependent upon opioids for their pain, he looked for other sources. This brought in kind of a volatile time period in his life. But every time we would see him at a class reunion, he was always upbeat. He was always happy, the same outgoing guy that we always knew in high school. And maybe it was the 20th class reunion that he began to bring Carol to the reunions. That was when we first met Carol. What a sweetheart she was.
Indeed, she was. And then they seemed to be perfectly matched because they had started dating originally back in high school, and then, kind of went their separate ways and then married other people. But it really truly was a love story to know that they came back together and seemed to be the perfect match. I think he referred to her as his soulmate, that she completed him. But again, like you said, the drugs were an issue because of the addiction, and so it then caused some problems between them. But she hung in there. She was supportive, but it was a very, very hard time, as it is for many people when they have the same kind of issues to deal with. I want to talk about something special that came from all of this, but before we can talk about that, we have to tell the listeners what tragic accident did come upon him that then ended his life.
In 2003, he was crossing the street in front of his house. He had just visited with one of his neighbors, and he was struck by a hit and run driver and killed. This was so upsetting to everyone. He was such a nice guy, and he was seemed to have his life back together, but he had lost Carol by this time. As a result of the accident, after the celebration of life, his sister-in-law, Joan, met with you to write the story in your book, Healing One Leaf at a Time. And an idea was born to do a fundraiser and do something to make his life meaningful. So we did a fundraiser with several classmates Rita and Linda, Denise, Joan, and yourself. And we did this at a local airport hangar, which was a wonderful contribution from one of your relatives. The members of the EAA chapter 582, Joe Deaton and Bill Herzl, you can go ahead and describe what they did. But we put together a fundraiser, which took a few months for us to put together, a lot of hard work and teamwork, and a fabulous committee of yourself, Rita, Linda, Denise, and Joan. And then at the fundraiser, we actually had some wonderful helpers, Carol, Debbie, Bonnie, Alan, Mac, Diana. It was really a team effort, and we managed to raise enough funds to award 3 scholarships at our former high school in his name. So last week, scholarships were awarded to a young man who ran track for 4 years, to a young lady who ran track for 4 years. They each got a $3,000 scholarship. And we had 3 volunteers to help us at the fundraiser that were senior students at the high school. 2 of them canceled at the last minute, but 1 showed up. And for that, she was honored with a $300 scholarship for showing up for Biff, because it was important to us that someone showed up for Biff. He didn't always have people showing up for him.
Well, and I think that the important thing was, too, that we all felt that we wanted his life to count for something, because he always felt like he wasn't good at anything but running. And so this became very important to all of us to say we wanted these students to know who he was, that he was good at running, and that we wanted them to be able to choose a path and hopefully stay on a good path and not make the same mistakes that he did. And I want the audience to know that you were the one that organized and put this all together and worked every day for weeks and weeks and weeks to pull this together. And it was a labor of love, but it was a lot of work. And I know that the high school, at the recent board meeting, when we were there to see the recipients and then be thanked for putting this together, I think that we can feel very happy with ourselves, that it's so important to say that you can make a mess, or you have mistakes in your life and you don't always get things right. And if there's a way that we can make it better and show what the positives were, I think that that is a story worth telling, and it was a story worth writing about and putting in the book, because there's other people who have made mistakes. We all do. And his life did count for something, and we want people to know that. So before we close, and I'm going to invite Joan, who also collaborated with working on writing the story, but also with working on the fundraiser, who was Carol's sister, and she took care of Carol while she was suffering with her cancer, which ended up taking her life. And then she took care of Biff afterwards. And she had made a promise to her sister that she would watch over him. And boy, did she.
Yes, she did. She was an angel.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what a wonderful person. And we were privileged to get to know her after all of this, and can call her a friend, and what a dear person she is. But before we close then this out, is there anything that you'd like to add that I didn't ask you, or that you want to share, or share with the audience about the importance of, forgiveness and understanding, and wanting to tell other people that you do count, you do matter?
Well, he was a good person. He had a huge heart. He was very giving to the people that he loved. I think your book says a lot, that in the end, his life meant something. And I think all of us that worked on this committee and this fundraiser wanted to demonstrate that he was an important person. His life did have meaning. He meant a lot to all of us. He was a good man with a good heart who had some bad breaks. That doesn't define a person in life. You can be whoever you want to be. Your life will matter.
I think that's well said. I do. Thank you for that, because it comes from the heart, and it came from the heart for most of us, because indeed we understand that you get off track sometimes, but unfortunately his life was taken, so he didn't have a chance to get things straightened out. But I hope that we honored him in a good way. Before we close, I would want to give a shout out to, and you did mention them, which was very important to us, the airport hangar that we were able to have the fundraiser at, which was by the grace of God, I guess, that we figured out that, wow, it's right across from the high school. So it seemed like it was a meant to be a place to have this. But a shout out to Joe Deaton, who was, I believe, the chapter president for EAA Chapter 582 in Toledo. And then also Bill Herzl, who is one of the officers. And they kind of went out of their way and every way possible to help make this a success for us, and we can't thank them enough.
Yes, they were wonderful to us, and they were so helpful in even the setting up and the taking down of the venue. We didn't expect to have them at our beck and call, but they were right there alongside helping us all the way. And the caterer was Butch from Country Catering. And the food was delicious. He gave us a great dinner that night. We had the auctioneers who came for the silent auction. We had so many donations from so many wonderful people. I don't think I've ever been to a fundraiser that had more than what we had to offer that night.
I would agree with you. And the people that attended said the same thing, that they had not been to an event like that before that had so many wonderful and great prizes. And they were big prizes, $100 gift cards to restaurants, and then
A $2,000 ring, even from Northwood Jewelers.
exactly, a plane ride on a cockpit biplane. I mean, just it was heaven sent for sure. And, the thank yous are just ongoing because it was truly, truly a wonderful event. So I can't thank you enough for taking the lead on this. You were amazing. You were a bulldog, I guess. You got up every morning and you had a plan and you went out there and beat the bushes and pulled this all together. So I also want to say, and I'm sure you want to say thank you to the VFW as well.
Yes, the VFW in Walbridge was wonderful to let us put all of our gift baskets together and to store a lot of the gifts.
It was absolutely amazing, the number of people, organizations that came together and, understood. And a lot of times when people are fundraising, you get a lot of no's. And I don't think we hardly got any no's.
I agree. People were just so generous.
Lorraine, could you share a little bit more about the donations that we received for the fundraiser? Because there were some amazing gifts that were donated.
Absolutely. A friend of mine, her son is the production manager and sound engineer for country western celebrity Justin Moore. And I knew Justin Moore was going to have a concert at the Toledo Zoo just a few days before our fundraiser. So I reached out to Jeff and I asked if they would possibly donate a couple tickets to the concert. His reply was pretty astonishing because not only were they going to donate concert tickets, they decided to do 4 tickets. Justin was going to personally autograph a guitar for our auction, as well as 2 of his signature leather cowboy hats. So we were thrilled. We held a raffle on the ticket sales and drew a ticket, and 4 people were selected to go to the concert on the Thursday evening. And they were absolutely thrilled because not only were they given free tickets, but they were also invited to sit down for a personal talk or conversation with Justin Moore. As well as those gifts, we had Scott Legato of Rockstar Photography. He is always at concerts for rock stars, does beautiful, beautiful work. So he donated a poster-sized photograph of Taylor Swift performing in concert for us. Crystal Bowersox from American Idol sent us 2 autographed CDs. A former classmate donated a customized swing and an Adirondack chair constructed from snow skis. And he, Mac, drove them all the way from Colorado. Northwood Jewelers donated a diamond and ruby ring that was retailed about $2,400. And Bill Herzl from the Toledo Metro Airport donated a plane ride in an open cockpit biplane. We had some tremendous, tremendous gifts. And also Channel 11 offered us a private station tour. So that was also on one of the bid auctions. We had so many other donations that are too numerous to mention, but we'd like to thank everyone who donated.
Adding to the list of donations, we also had a professional baseball player, Jay Spohn, number 85 with the Pittsburgh Pirates, that donated through his grandmother, Debbie, also a former classmate, an autographed broken bat and glove. And let me tell you, the bidding was tense for this. Also, our classmates, Becky and Jim Harmon, donated from Sawmill Creek by Cedar Point Resorts, a very generous overnight stay, breakfast, and 18 holes of golf for 2 people. That was valued at $750. Our former classmates worked very hard, and they all gave from their heart. It was definitely something that was talked about and is still talked about, all the amazing gifts. And like we had already said, that people had been to other events like this and didn't have near the choices and, everything about it, the food, the music by Abbigale Rose, all of it. It was just an amazing evening. And we were blessed with good weather too. So it was very, very memorable. So I want to say thank you as well to all of the wonderful people that gave and were there and allowed us to give these great scholarships then to the Lake High School students.
If I may, I'd like to give a special shout out to Abbigale Rose. She was a guest on Channel 11 2 different Saturdays prior to the fundraiser, helping to promote this event. And I also would like to tell you that she is on the end of this podcast. You'll be able to hear her music. She's a local musician, very talented, and we were thrilled to have her and appreciate everything that she did for us. She kept the fundraiser on schedule the entire time for us, so we relied on her heavily, and she was an angel.
Indeed, she is. She is. And you're right. She's very talented. And yes, she does the background music for all the podcasts. So we're very, very appreciative of everything that Abbigale does in the community and around the other locations. So
I'd like to do a shout out for Marjo Cooper and Nicole Schmeltz at Lake High School. He is the superintendent, and she is the athletic director. A couple of us went to Lake High School. We met with the superintendent, Marjo Cooper, who was thrilled that we would be doing a fundraiser for scholarships for Lake High School. But we were under the impression that Lake High School owned the scholarship, therefore we would have no input on how the funds would be given out in the future. So surprisingly, a few weeks ago, we were contacted by Marjo, who referred us to the athletic director, Nicole Schmeltz, who asked for our input. And so she very graciously said, yes, we would give a scholarship to a male track runner, a female track runner. And because one of the 3 volunteering seniors was the only one to show up at the fundraiser to help out, they allowed us to give her a small scholarship to recognize her for showing up. It was really important to us because we're looking at showing up for Biff, because no one showed up for Biff. And here was a young lady, only 17, 18 years old, who could have been at 20 other places, and she showed up.
yes, and it was special that she was there and helped serve food and helped at the tables and stuff. So it did mean a lot to all of us.
Absolutely. I'd like to mention that back in high school and even a few years after, Biff always treated me as his younger sister. He was always looking out for me. He's kind of like my protector. So I feel very blessed that I had this opportunity to look after him and his legacy. So thank you for allowing me to help.
I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for being a dear friend and for coming together whenever there's something that needs to be done. You're somebody that can always be counted on. You have a great heart. You were a very good friend to Biff as well. And he knew that. I was able to see him. Gosh, I had a phone call from him. I've saved it on my voicemail the morning of the day that he passed. So again, he was in our lives and then not in our lives, but our memory is very, very strong. And we hope that these 3 students that got the scholarships will go on and stay on a good path and make him proud and make us proud that all this that we care about and did for him is very, very meaningful.
And I want to personally thank you because I don't believe this could have happened without all of your efforts.
Well, thank you. So I'm sending you a hug and I'm sending the listeners with a message that thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And we do what we do with these podcasts because we want people to know you matter. You deserve better. You matter. And we want to try to get the very best out of all of our lives.
Thank you.
Joan, hello and welcome.
Hi, Sarah. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So good to have you today. To start off, how is it that you knew Bev and how did he first come into your life?
Well, my sister Carol, who's a little younger than me by a year, she was dating Biff in high school. And I wasn't living at home at the time. I was away for my high school years. And so I really didn't get to know Biff then. It was years later when Carol hooked up with Biff again. That's really when I got to know him.
So then they were dating like in high school, I'm hearing you say, and then later on they got back together.
Right. Yes.
In the book, which, by the way, we want the listeners to know that together you and I collaborated on the story because you were so close with your sister, Carol, and with Biff. But they each married then somebody else. So this dating that started in high school then ended up that they went their separate ways and ended up marrying other people. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Carol dated different guys during high school, Biff being one of them, I think in her earlier years when she was at Stritch and he was at Lake. But what happened was he kind of drifted out of her life, although I have to say, from things that she had said to me, she always remembered him and thought much of him. So yeah, she went ahead and married somebody much older than her. They had a little girl, and Carol's life was happy to a point, but it was a difficult life as well with her husband. There were many struggles, and during those years, I do not know for sure if Carol ever came across Biff because having gotten married. I don't know if their paths crossed during the times that they were, both married to other people. But it was after Carol divorced her husband that I don't know exactly what the circumstances were, but I do remember that one big incident in Biff's life was the motorcycle accident that almost took his life. That I remember Carol vividly telling me how concerned she was about what happened to him. And how she found out that it happened, I think, was just through friends. And I think that was the big thing that reconnected them.
So a tragic accident kind of brought them back together. So then they, from there, moved in together. She moved into his house at a certain point, or did they have plans for marriage, or how did their reunion look like at that point?
From what I remember, because I was living out of state, but Carol and I always kept in touch. I don't think they had planned on moving in together at the time that they did, but Carol had started to get real sick with cancer. And in the beginning, she was holding her own pretty well. She stayed active with the chemo and did all the things that she could. But what ended up happening was as things were progressing, Carol began to realize that it would be much easier for her, instead of staying at our mom's house. My mom was a widow, and she was trying hard to take care of Carol in any way that she could. But Mom's house had steps, and it was further away from where her doctor's offices were. So with Carol's connection with Biff immediately offered her to come and stay with him because he had a one-story home, and he lived in West Toledo, so it was much closer to the doctors that she needed to see. And so it was a natural decision, really, for Carol to make that choice to move in with Biff. And of course, he was very happy because he was taking very good care of her, and that made Mom feel real happy. And their friendship grew stronger during those days because, especially as Biff was realizing how sick Carol was, and Carol totally appreciated everything he was doing for her.
Wow. So, that is very warm to hear because first she was at his side after the motorcycle accident, and she was there for him, and then in turn, then he was there for her. So definitely there was a special bond between the two of them that lasted for a very long time. So the cancer diagnosis was definitely very tragic. And there was a special dog that came into their lives. So that dog's name was Sully. Can you tell us a little bit about Sully, because it took such a significant meaning to both Carol and Biff?
Right. Carol had been able to go out and about and, shop and things like that. And one day she happened to go out to Spring Meadows, and the pet store out there was having a promotion to adopt pets. And she saw this beautiful little puppy. And another woman was determined that she was going to get him. But as it turned out, Carol called Biff immediately on the phone and told him about Sully. And Biff was very, very excited about it. And so he came out to see the dog, and they really had to do some coaxing for that other woman to not take him. Not that she had first choice or anything, but she was just more determined. Very outspoken woman. But it ended up that Carol just had fallen in love when she saw him. And then so did Biff when he came and saw Sullivan. And so it was just really sweet, because this was at the beginning stages of Carol's illness, and Sully was just such comfort to her. And then, of course, Sully became her shadow, and he loved Biff too, but of course not as much as Carol. And Carol's needs at that time, of course, were much stronger than Biff's were. So the therapy dog really is what he was for Carol. And then, of course, when Carol passed, the fact that Sully was still with Biff, Sully became Biff's shadow, and he was great, great therapy and comfort to Biff.
That's wonderful. I remember having the urn at the house on the fireplace, with Sully. So it was definitely a strong connection for both of them. And then at the end of the chapter in the book, you made reference to Sully. Do you remember what that was that you shared?
In the book?
Yes, I thought that it had to do with having him ashes maybe buried with them, or not.
Yes, that's absolutely what happened. His daughter decided, well, first of all, I'm sorry, Biff himself wanted to make sure that Sully's ashes were mixed with his ashes, because Sully died 3 months before Biff died, and Biff was just totally lost during that time without Sully. And it was every day was such a challenge for him. So he kept the little box of ashes very much visible to him, so that it was like Sully was still there. And then he told me directly that he wanted to make sure that those ashes were mixed with his own, if anything should happen to him. And of course, at that time, he didn't realize he wasn't going to be much long after Sully in leaving this earth. So, yes, the ashes were mixed, and they are buried with my sister Carol.
I didn't remember exactly, but I remember that I was deeply touched at the fact that that was a special request. Now, there was something that your sister asked you to do before she died that involved Biff, and that was something very, very important to her. And can you tell us about that, please?
During the time that Carol was very sick and living at Biff's, I was able to take some time off of teaching, and I was able to stay with her and Biff and help out as best I could. There were several nights that Carol and I would talk about different things, and I don't know what time this happened, but maybe a couple of months before Carol passed. But she one evening looked at me, and with real sincerity in her eyes, she says, "Joan, if anything happens to me," she said, please look after Biff. Make sure he stays involved in the family. Just don't let him be on his own, because she said, I know this is going to be very difficult for him if something does happen to me. And so I felt a real responsibility to do as Carol had asked me, because I realized that she was very concerned about that.
And that turned out to be pretty much a full-time job for you, I believe.
Yes, it did. Biff was really he was just in such depression. It's something that he had fought prior to Carol's death, but it, of course, got very bad to deal with after she passed away. So yes, it became a busy time for me to help take care of him in the best ways that I could.
Well, and we have talked about in the book, and also yesterday, because we want to talk about the scholarship that was awarded in his honor, the, Biff Hamilton Scholarship at Lake High School, which was just a very, very big blessing. But he didn't always make good choices. He did have mistakes, but he was still a warm and wonderful person. And what you and I talked about that, urged us on to write his story and to also then try to establish this scholarship was because, he didn't feel like he was very good at many things and that maybe he hadn't done the best that he could in his life. And he thought that the only thing he was good at was running, but that we felt that there was a lot that he contributed. He touched many lives. He was warm and wonderful. He just got off track.
Right.
And we wanted people to learn from that story that yes, you can get off track, but hoping that these students that were awarded the scholarships would be able to choose a good path and try very, very hard to stay on it.
That's right.
Could you elaborate a little bit more about what that was like in planning his celebration of life and then how that came about with the fundraiser and then the scholarship award?
Well, running, as you were saying, Sarah, running was such a positive thing in his life. And so when you approached me about the possibility of doing a fundraiser in his honor, it really made sense. His back den room in his house, on every one of the walls, he had pictures of his running the Boston Marathon and other medals or ribbons and things from his years of running. And he was just so proud of those things because he knew that in his life he had made some pretty bad decisions about things. But knowing that the positive thing in his life that he did end up being so proud of with the running just made his life so much more meaningful. And his daughter, of course, another one of his pride and joys in his life, then followed in his footsteps and became a runner as well. And that just meant so much to him. So to start the fundraiser off knowing that we wanted to collect whatever money we could to have a scholarship so that his name would be remembered and that his name would be honored at his high school through the lives of a couple other students. For us that knew Biff, we just knew that he would have been so humbled and yet so excited that his life really was helping other kids. I think that would have just sent him to the moon and back because he just would have been so shocked. We thought that and you in particular, Sarah, in thinking about doing this fundraiser, it just made so much sense. And the good that came out of it is just something that none of us will ever forget. And in his name, I just know that many people shared the happiness of that fundraiser.
And it really was. It was a labor of love. It was a lot of work for all of us. But it was the results and the reason behind what we were doing was so meaningful that it definitely touched our lives and it touched a lot of other lives. So I want to say, Joan, before we say goodbye here, that meeting you and getting to know you and now having this wonderful friendship, it is very meaningful to me. It's like, God put us together, and it's because of your sister and because of Biff. And so I'm eternally grateful. You mean a lot to me, and I want us to stay connected. So thank you for being who you are and what you do. And thank you for joining together with me to, like we did, share his story in the hope that it's going to touch other people and someone else that might think that their life didn't amount to much or didn't mean much. It does, that there's good that can come from everyone. So thank you very much for being here today.
Well, thank you, sir. It was an honor. And we know that Biff's life and memory does live on through the lives of the people that knew and loved him and cherished his life. And I just want to thank you for letting me be a part of this.
Well, thank you again. So let's stay connected, and we'll have to talk about that scholarship possibility for this year. But you take care, and I wish you the very, very best.
Thank you so much, sir, and the best to you too.
So that's all for today. Before we go, we want to let you know that both of these books are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and many other bookstores. You can also follow me on my website, sarahshaw.org, Facebook at Sarah Shaw, X, Instagram, and YouTube. Please tune in for our next guest, Dr. Linda Parker, President and CEO of Women in Distress in Broward County, Florida. Until then, remember this verse. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. 2 Timothy 1:7.